where lust for a whole life and nothing but less makes people jump out of a comfortable pond into an unknown ocean. Welcome to that journey between the East and the West. Who says Rolling Stones don't gather moss? Hello, everyone. I am Meenu Gupta, your host for the day, and I'm delighted to have you join me every week as amazing people share their incredible and inspiring life stories of straddling continents. Thank you.
She's adventurous. Now, how do I know that? My guest for today, Becky Harris, started life as a mechanical engineer in the UK, but then broke away to work and travel across Latin America. In 1998, she worked for Save the Children in Colombia and Peru, and then backpacked from Peru to Canada. In 2000, she bought a car in Guatemala and drove to Toronto in Canada. Somewhere in between, she even cycled across Southeast Asia. Becky has not only founded and run several travel companies in different parts of the world, but also developed software and set up a company for that as well. I'm assuming that is where the engineer in her sprang out. However, whatever she set up had to do with travel, particularly luxury travel and adventure. So, Becky, first of all, a very warm welcome. And
Thank you.
do spill the beans on why and how the travel bug got to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, first of all, Meenu. Yes, I think the travel bug, well, when I was very young, I was only 8 months old, and my father got a job in Ghana in Africa, and he was teaching teachers how to be teachers. And so we went to live in Ghana for 5 years when I was very, very small. But obviously, I can't remember much of that, but maybe that got it in my blood. But I think the main starting point was I did a year of my university degree in Spain. So I studied mechanical engineering, and in those days we had a Erasmus scheme, and I went to study in Spain for a year and loved everything Spanish, Latin, learned the language, and then every summer when I was working, or every year when I was working, we'd get 6 weeks holidays and we'd go somewhere, India, Vietnam, somewhere, and I just loved travel. And then after a few years, I guess that's when I thought, do I want to be an engineer? And that's when I went traveling and started my adventure, starting with Save the Children, and it just kind of grew from there.
So you started traveling with your children.
Oh no, sorry, I left my engineering job and I got a volunteer placement originally with Save the Children in Colombia. And I volunteered for a bit, and then I got a job in Peru with Save the Children, and I worked there for a year or so, living in Peru. And then I went traveling, um, and then I ended up working back in the States as an engineer for a little while, um, but finally ended up in Guatemala, where I set up a travel company, and I lived for 8 years. So yes, it's been quite an adventure, but eventually I've come back home. But yes, I've lived and worked in many countries around the world and continue to travel all the time as part of my job. And I do love to travel with my daughter, which is a great treat to have such a flexible lifestyle that I can travel with her when she's on holiday.
How old is she?
Now she's 16, but she first traveled when she was 3 months old, and she traveled from Guatemala. She was born in Guatemala, and we took her to the States to see her grandparents and her American grandparents when she was 3 months old. And she in 16 years she's been to about 40 different countries with me and her father, and she flew on her own from a very early age, and yeah, she's spoiled in terms of travel, definitely. That's the thing I don't mind spending money on.
And so let me understand. So you had she was born in Guatemala, and then she lived there with you, and then you went to the next After you were there for what, 8 years?
That's right. So she was born in Guatemala, so she's a Chapina, as they're known. And me and her father have a travel company there. And but when she was about 2, I came back to Britain, and she spent about 8 years in Britain. And then after that, we went to live in the States. So she's actually living. I lived there for 5 years, and she's now still there. She's 16 now, so she's finishing off high school in California. So yes, she's lived. She has already lived in a few different countries and traveled to many more. So yeah.
But then, in that case, she would be what we typically call, by definition, a third culture kid, a TCK, right?
I guess so. She's got three nationalities in a way. Yes, she's Guatemalan, British, and North American. American.
And all of them have different styles of parenting, right? How did that work out with being a parent and as a person?
Yes, I mean, I think when we were in Guatemala, I was working, but I was self-employed, so I was lucky. I was flexible, but we had a lovely housekeeper who also kind of doubled as a nanny, and she had wonderful Guatemalan, sayings to do with raising children. You should put a piece of red cotton on her forehead to stop her hiccups, or different things that were local customs and local traditions. And sometimes it's helpful, and sometimes it's a bit frustrating when you you, you don't share the same philosophy and that kind of thing. But you know, my daughter's so lucky because she had all these different people in her life from different countries and different cultures, and different languages that, okay, she may not have understood, but just hearing them, I think, is something very advantageous. So yes, she had 2 years in Guatemala, but has gone back to visit numerous times. Um, and then 8 years in the UK, which UK culture, we're quite rigid. Is that the word? I don't know. We're quite British. I don't know. I'd have to have somebody out who's not British to tell us what we're like or what we're thought of in the world. But she went to a lovely small school in our village, and lots of outdoor stuff and beautiful scenery, and lots of cups of tea, obviously. And then at 10 or 11, just before the pandemic hit, she moved to California. So she's now had, a good 5, 6 years in California, which, is an English speaking country, North America, but it's very different culturally. And so, yes, she's been exposed. And California, the states are so huge. I mean, I always think of each state as its own country, really. It's almost has its own culture, and own personality. So she's basically, I say she's been living in California more than she's been living in North America. But yeah, it's been, a totally different education system, totally different way of living. Yeah, it's been interesting, and yeah, let's see where she ends up after that. She's lucky. The world is her oyster, so to speak. Although, since leaving Brexit, we don't have quite as much flexibility as we used to enjoy here in Britain to go and work and live. But yes, still, I think she's got that travel bug as well. She's got that desire to take a year out and travel, and see things and meet people and see how that influences her in terms of what strikes her passion, what she wants to do with her life.
You just mentioned also that, of course, even though they are both English speaking countries, US and UK, the culture is very different. Type of living and values are also different. And the way people are, some people might say you were right in saying you don't know what other people think of Brits and so on. Generally, the stereotype that people have is British people are a bit more conservative or a bit more stiff upper lip and so on, while US would be more generally, again, the stereotype would be more loud and boisterous and let your hair down kind of thing. Is that right? Stereotypes.
Well, I mean, the stereotypes, I suppose, exist for a reason, and none of us like to be pigeonholed into anything, do we? We're all individuals. I mean, I live in the north of the UK. I don't agree with that stereotype. I mean, I think the British can be some of the warmest, funniest, most friendly people in the world. Maybe we take a bit of getting to know. But I live in the north of England and I love it. You can't, you walk down the street, everyone smiles at you. I mean, I know London is perhaps people think it's not very friendly, but it's a big city and I'm sure that's the same everywhere in the world. But I love Britain. Some people don't like where they came from and never go back. But for me, I always feel like a lot of people I know who've lived abroad do tend to end up going back. I only speak for myself, really. I felt very homesick and in living in the States particularly. And but maybe it's my age as well. I'm in my 50s now. I'm ready to get a dog and settle down, keep traveling. But I mean, I think British people are very authentic. I think they build deep friendships. And we're maybe not, we cover a lot with humor, perhaps. I think that's changing. I think people do speak more deeply and more emotionally than perhaps in past generations. I was only in North America for 5 years, and it was during the pandemic, and it was hard to make friends. I didn't make any friends really. Well, I did a couple, one who's Irish, so that doesn't count. I know a lot of US people in the travel industry, and they're wonderful, and yeah, I couldn't really speak to the stereotypes. It's really important to find your tribe, wherever you are in the world, is find your subsection of people that jive with you. You have similar values, similar interests, you have things to talk about, you have things to discuss, you can work on projects and have purpose together. I think that's really important, and that's a good way to find community wherever you're living in the world, because it can be very lonely. I'm sure people who've worked and been expats, it can be very lonely, and you can get to the point that you start to only socialize with people of your own nationality living in that country, which is not really what we want to be doing, is it?
I was going to ask you that question, but you already arrived at that. I was going to ask, where and what is home for you? Where do you think you belong?
Britain's definitely home for me. I feel very British. I had the most amazing life from when I left Britain. The adventures I've lived have been incredible. I would not change any of it. Like you said, I lived in Colombia, Peru. I drove a car from Guatemala to Toronto. I lived in Latin America for 12 years. I built a very successful business with two business partners in Guatemala, which is still operating. That was just an incredible time of life to live in Guatemala for 8 years. My heart is there. It's such a beautiful country, such amazing people. And Latin America in general is just amazing. The rich culture, everything, the food, the music, the people, the scenery, the culture. But now I I've come home and this is home. I think I've always felt this is home. I didn't. Personally, other people I'm sure have gone somewhere and thought this is where I belong. But for me, Britain's always been home, and it's nice to know that you can always travel and live in a country and work in a country for a certain time, but there's something beautiful about knowing that you can always come home, or that's how I feel about it anyway.
So, where you are right now, is it the same place where you were born, or is it another city?
Oh, it's another city. I was born in Loughborough in the Midlands, which is probably most known for its university, which is a very good sports and engineering uni. But I went to university in Newcastle in the north, fantastic city, great people, the Geordies. And then I spent a year in Spain as part of that degree. And then I lived in Chester for 4 years when I worked for ICI as an engineer. And I guess I was 24 when I went traveling. So I was abroad from 24 to about, yeah, gosh, for at least 12 years, if not longer. When I left Guatemala, I came up to Yorkshire. So I live in Yorkshire now, near Wetherby, just between York and Leeds. It was kind of random. When I left Guatemala, I didn't really know where to go. That's one of the downsides, I think, of living abroad for a long time, especially pre-Facebook, pre-social media, which was when I was doing it. It becomes hard to keep friendships, and when you eventually come back home, it people have moved on, and you haven't necessarily been able to keep in touch very much. So when I came back, I guess I could have gone anywhere because I wasn't coming back for a job as well. I had my own business, so it was a bit kind of pin the tail on the donkey. Where shall I go and live? So I've ended up in Yorkshire, which I'm extremely happy about. Yes, I love it.
Oh, nice. So you just said, okay, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, this is the place I'm going to be.
Pretty much, yes, pretty much. I did know a few people from my university days that were in the area. I think that's probably why I chose it. My memory's not as good as it used to be, so but I suppose most people move where the job takes them, and that's what's been slightly different for me because I was always self-employed. I wasn't going to a place for a particular job or spouse or anything like that. Yeah.
And between the East and the West, you've really traveled from, I believe, in India and the Eastern countries, Asia, all over North, South, wherever. Which place has been your favorite in terms of people, place, culture, any which way?
Well, I've got a few favorites. It's always hard to pick a definite favorite, isn't it? I mean, I would say the friendliest people, I've traveled a lot, and the friendliest people I would say were in Ethiopia and Slovenia. I had a mind blowing trip to Ethiopia. So I took my daughter, we went community trekking, and obviously, Ethiopia has had such a turbulent time, as in, when people can travel there. I know you can travel to certain areas now. And then another aspect of favorite is where I felt most. So me and my friend, we wanted to do a cycling trip on our own with no assistant, nothing, very little planned, in fact. And we said, where in the world can we go? Because we're not expert cyclists and, this, that, and the other, and we don't really know what route we're taking or anything like this. And we said, let's go to Southeast Asia. We ended up going to Thailand because we just felt, as two women on our own cycling, Southeast Asia is where we felt really safe, and that no matter what happened to us, we would be looked after and we would make it work. So Thailand is also Southeast Asia. I mean, Vietnam is one of my favorites too. We cycled in Vietnam this following year. Cycling is interesting because I think people take pity on you. I think they think that you can't afford a proper holiday, so you've cycled. It's just such a great way to see a country because you're going fast enough that you cover ground. You're not trying to hike across the whole country, but slow enough that you really see things and you stop and you meet people. We used to stop and have, our Diet Coke and peanut breaks, and people always stop and chat. And what are you doing? Two strange women on your own on bicycles. And the food of Southeast Asia as well. I'm actually taking my daughter back to Vietnam this summer. And then, I mean, India is incredible, absolutely incredible. And again, every area of India is so different, isn't it? And everybody goes to the Golden Triangle, but the Northeast and then the Himalayas and Kerala and the South and Varanasi and every area is so different. The wildlife, some people don't even realize there's so much wildlife. You can do the Big Five in India. So India is one of my favorites that I would love to do more of. I mean, my heart is in Latin America, of course. Guatemala has to be one of my favorites. But the world is so vast and so different. It's really hard to have a favorite because everywhere offers something different and unique. And I haven't even been in everywhere yet. So, one of the things we try to talk about in the travel industry is getting off the beaten path, not always going to the supposed highlights of the country, that there is actually, you can have a more unique, authentic, life affirming experience if you actually go to the lesser visited areas and really try and meet people and get involved and find out what life's like, and talk about your life with them, their lives with you, that kind of thing. So I think for me, it's trying to travel authentically still in this world of technology and everybody's connected and an iPhone can get you anywhere, the more you can kind of strip it back and really travel like I used to travel as a backpacker, in the sense of feeling like it's a real adventure and it's a real kind of exploration, and you're really doing something different and a little bit challenging. That's how I yearn to travel still.
Since you lived also in many of these countries, not just for a short time, but longer periods of time. So it was not just traveling, but experiencing day to day life. So there's another stereotype that says the East is family oriented and the West is more independent. So we say, again, stereotype is that there's more play of interdependence in the way people are brought up and nurtured in the East, and it's a different in the West. Did you find it true in your experience?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I mean, certainly I would say Latin America, which is where I spent most of my time, from what I saw, is very family orientated. People live at home longer. There's definitely a lot of celebrations as family, get togethers as family. Certainly in British culture, we move away. It's almost like that's part of life as a 16 or 18. You kind of leave home, get a job, go to uni, whatever, then go and work, get a job somewhere. It might be anywhere in the country. And I think it is less so. Yeah. But every family is different. Yeah, I'm always jealous of that. That the great big family celebrations, whether you get on with everybody or not, it's an own community, and there's a safety there, isn't there, as well, and there's a well-being. I come from a very small family and um, didn't really have that at all. So it's nice when you see it, big family meal times, family traditions that you do every year together as a family, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think the stereotype exists for a reason. Again, it doesn't cover everybody, but I would say in Latin America they were very family focused, and that's kind of the place that I know there.
I guess that would also hold true for areas like in Asia, India, Thailand, and Vietnam, and so on. I guess those areas also what people generally, again, stereotype. It is very, very interesting to have these family get-togethers, etc. It brings a feeling of connectedness.
Yeah, and support as well. I don't think I said that, but a lot of communities that are family orientated and community orientated and support each other. There's that old saying about the frogs in a bucket, and you've got some frogs in a bucket trying to get out of the bucket, or crabs or something like that. And the British crabs are like pulling the next one down, like, no, you're not allowed, I want to get out. And that, in a Latin family or in a Indian family or a Thai family, in a different culture, they're standing on each other's shoulders to help each other out and then pulling them out. It's like a community effort, everyone helping each other. Again, massive stereotyping. I feel like I'm getting into dangerous territory here, but I think any cultures or communities or families that help each other. I mean, I guess there's a downside to that too. Maybe there's a lack of privacy, or maybe you want to escape and you can't get to do what you want to do or go where you want to do. I don't know. But again, I just think it's nice if you feel supported and part of a big family, part of the community. It must be nice.
That's interesting. What a lovely and interesting visual you got, actually. Says it all. Okay, generally of stereotypes, and I agree, stereotypes to a certain extent, and there are then individuals and individual families also who might be exceptions to stereotypes for sure, especially with changing times and global mobility. People carry their own values and cultures to another part of the world, and then try to do a mishmash of both that side and this side and arrive at some point, hopefully at a more comfortable point. So, having said that, in this adventurous life that you've led and you are leading, I know it's difficult to have favorites. You had many of them, and you are in the travel industry, so you would not like to be in a bad place like, no, I cannot name one place. But yes, I'm sure with an experience, there might be an experience is not just about a place and people. It's much more than that, it's about a lot about you as a person. Everybody's oriented differently. So, which was the most interesting experience as an adventurer?
I mean, I think probably setting up the business in Guatemala was multifaceted. It was adventurous and life affirming. And it was huge because I'd only been at work 4 years at that point in any job. And I guess we were in LA and we had this crazy idea because I traveled through Guatemala and loved it. And my then partner, James, had also been to Guatemala and loved it. So we kind of, with the naivety of youth, drove down from LA to Guatemala with a couple of kayaks on the top of a truck and thought we'd set up a travel business. And we didn't really know what on earth we were doing at the time. It grew from there and it's now very successful. But we always had in the back of I mean, it's kind of, the white people, the Brits and the American coming to Guatemala, but it wasn't like that. I was always very much of the mind that we wanted to set up a company that was about experiences. We wanted to also show people Guatemala wasn't scary and it was safe and it had incredible, beautiful boutique hotels and volcanoes and jungles and temples and all these incredible things. Because at that time, it was 2001, people still had a very, especially from North America, I would say, still had a very kind of suspect view of Central America and Guatemala in particular. So it was just this incredible adventure of getting to know people and places and hotel owners. It was very personal, the whole thing. Like we had very deep relationships with owners of hotels like Casa Palapo at the time. Billy owned it. He started it, Hacienda in Copan, Hacienda San Lucas in Copan, and La Lancha before Francis Ford Coppola bought it. It was just this incredible adventure of traveling around, getting to know people, thinking about how do we design a cool tortilla experience? How do we do sunset drinks on the Yaksha temple? And how do we find staff and train them? And we didn't want to be in Guatemala City, so we were in Antigua. So most of our staff hadn't been to university, and we trained them. We were very big on guide training, and we were also very big on trying to get people all around Guatemala, spread the wealth, I used to say. I think the model used to be that one guide would go with you everywhere, and that guide probably was from Guatemala City or maybe Antigua. And so our model was no, if you travel from here to Lake Atitlan, you have a guide from Lake Atitlan. Then you go to Flores, Tikal, you have a guide from that area, from that community. And yeah, please, let's go up to Shela and let's go into the Cuchimatanes and let's go to Rio Dulce and across to Copan. And so the adventure of knowing how to build a business, how to run it in a foreign country, how to employ, manage, develop staff, and then for that company to actually be successful and do well and continue to do well. And I think we did do a good job of promoting the country. We had to kind of promote the country first and then us second. So hopefully we did something to help Guatemala's image because we were going to luxury travel shows and adventure travel shows and talking to people that maybe had never thought about sending people to Guatemala before. It was an amazing adventure and it was a very purposeful adventure. It wasn't about money. I was too young and naive to really think about money. I was still saving the world from my Save the Children days, and luckily it ended up making money. But I think it was definitely more than that to all of us. There was myself, James Goller, and Biet Brunschwiller, who sadly passed away a few years ago from a heart attack. But Biat lived there. We met him. He was already living there doing mountain biking. And he was kind of the cornerstone because he was married to Guatemala and he understood the culture. He was respected. And yeah, he brought an incredible amount of knowledge and strength and presence that me and James didn't have yet. And he actually worked. We have an amazing community glamping up in Washaktoon, which was, I think, born out of the idea of Carlos Vivar, who is one of the top guides. It's his community, amazing community. They saw planes before they saw cars because the Wrigley Spearmint Company used to send planes into the jungle to get the chigle from the tree to make chewing gum. They had a runway before they had roads. So everyone Google Carlos Vivar and read his story. It's amazing. So he came up with the idea to have this community glamping within the Washatun community and benefit the community, bring tourists, they could stay the night in the community and really experience jungle life. And yeah, it's an amazing product. So, things like that. And that was Beat's brainchild. And he was always pushing us to bike here and hike there and explore the whole country and get to know people. So yeah, that would be, I think, it's had a huge impression on me, and it was hard to have to leave the business and leave Guatemala due to personal circumstances. It's a big part of my heart. I wish that for everyone, to really have that job, that role, or even maybe it's outside of work, but some kind of purpose that you absolutely love and you put your heart into it, and it's just a great feeling, especially when you do it with other people and you can see the fruits of your labors, and it means something. That's beyond anything else I've ever done, creating that company and working with those people and living in Guatemala and having my daughter there is just it's wonderful to know she's a Chapina.
What is exactly a chapina?
It's like if you're Guatemalan, but you're Chapins, and then a Chapina is like, what would you say? Gringa, or if you're from Newcastle, you're a Geordie. So it's from
Ah,
the
okay,
nickname
okay.
is from being there.
From the
So she's a
place,
Chapina.
yes. Well, I think the company that you set up, from what I understand, was actually your first baby. And any place and anywhere when you put your heart and purpose driven, as you said, and you nurture it, wherever nurturing comes in, whether it's an idea or person or whatever, and your heart comes in. And you said you did not really set out to make money. It was just an amazing and purposeful journey, and it just generated that. So I think that was this cause and effect, yes, wherever, and that was your baby, and it's remained in your heart.
Yeah, it flowed. It really flowed. When people say they find flow in life, I think that was my flow moment. It was my first baby. Very insightful. Yes.
What is that one thing that, or is that probably an inborn philosophy or something which helped you adapt, which you would resort to whenever you faced a challenge? Because every place and every community would also come with a challenge of its own, because a challenge is we don't know what they know and why they know it. So
Yes, adapting to challenges in different countries.
yes, I mean,
Um,
there must be some innate, inborn philosophy which maybe you have to thread down to, okay, this is what I believe in, and this is what I brought out, and this is what helped me each time. Something I'm
yeah.
assuming which your daughter must have also picked up involuntarily. I mean, I'm sure
Mm,
because she's traveled and lived with you, and children adapt, they observe and adapt. And sometimes we
mm.
don't know the philosophy we are following, which really helps us, but there is generally something very innate.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think ultimately we have to remember we're the visitors. I think that's really important. And I think having an absolutely open mind, patience, which I don't actually have much of, but I learn. I mean, things like flexibility and tolerance and empathy, I think flexibility is a great thing that my daughter, I think, has definitely learned from traveling. You'll eat when we find some food, and you'll eat what's here. And if things don't, I mean, if you're on a very posh, structured trip, of course, it's not like that. It's all worked out for you, and that's what you paid for. But say you're in a more of a backpacking or kind of going with the flow kind of travel, it yeah, you have to be flexible. Things go wrong. It's life. I guess for me, the challenge is part of the fun. That was probably my philosophy traveling. That's what I enjoyed. I enjoyed working out how I'm going to get from A to B. Where shall I go next? Where am I going to stay? I enjoyed meeting people and hearing their stories. One of the joys of backpacking was that you'd meet people from all over the world, even though you're in one country and visiting, you'd actually meet people from all over the world, which was quite nice too. But yeah, I think that's the main thing. My attitude was one of adventure, and the fact that it was a bit challenging, that was part of the fun. I don't actually like having it too choreographed for me. And yeah, just taking things more slowly as well and listening. I mean, I think that's one of the things traveling does, if people are open to it, can help us all be more tolerant and empathetic and understanding. You have to let go of control to a certain extent, which a lot of us in the Western world do not like doing. If your eyes are open, you start to see why people believe some of the things that they believe and act in the way that they do because of history, situation, whatever, culture, religion, beliefs, values. Everything is different. And I think being open to everything, at least to listen, you don't have to agree with everything, but it's the more we understand, the better we can maneuver in life as well. There's so many benefits to traveling, and I do advocate people traveling more slowly, more off the beaten path, more authentically, taking their children as there's always somewhere you can take your children. I mean, I always say about Disneyland, if you're going to spend $10,000 taking your children to Disneyland, why not take them to Morocco, Costa Rica? I just think travel has so much to teach us if it's done in the right way. And there's so much benefit. I know that climate change and we don't want to be flying everywhere, but the actual benefit of traveling with the right local company in the right way, giving money to the communities, leaving the money in the country, actually listening and, interacting with local people and trying to learn. It's like, how do I make this experience the most rewarding for myself and for where I am?
Well, that's very nicely put. I think I've been doing a bit of that with my son. Actually, we plan, of course, but whenever things go completely the other way, like suddenly sitting somewhere else, a flight is cancelled, luggage is not arrived, living out of I don't know what, buying suddenly looking for emergencies. But then that's when I told my son, that's when things turn into an adventure.
Mm.
Now
Yeah,
your adventure has begun. So
yeah.
all the planning points are there, and then your
Mm.
adventure is when things have not gone as planned. And then the best thing to do is, I've told him, then you can start thanking God. Thank God, at least I have my clothes on. I brought my medicine with
Yes,
me. Thank
practice
God I thought of it.
gratitude. Yes. Well, also it teaches you problem solving. How do I make the best of this situation? Is there something I can be doing to pass the time or make this go away? Or it does teach you problem solving. But yes, it also teaches you gratitude, which, as we know as human beings, is what we need to keep practicing.
Yes, gratitude, a positive attitude, and getting
Yeah.
out of your own mental box and observing other people who could be going
Mm.
through a lot at that time, other people who are probably handling the mess, for example. So,
Mm.
getting out of your own problem and looking out. And that sort of changes because then you realize that your life is not in your own bubble, which is inside your head and that small little space called your body.
Yeah.
There's the whole world out there.
Yeah. And I think travelers have an attitude. I think, especially the old-fashioned backpackers. Like, I can't travel now without an eye looking at, is someone not okay? Does someone need help? Every time I used to arrive back in Guatemala from abroad, I would kind of look around the arrivals hall and see, is anybody like stuck for a lift, especially if it's like late at night, and I would like check if everyone's okay before I went and got my car in case someone needed a lift to Antigua or something like that. I don't say that for anything apart from, it's just interesting. I think you kind of have a mentality of helping each other. I don't know.
No, it's true. It's true. I've always, I mean, even in a flight, as I've ended up having long-term friendships on flights, trains, and so on. And then I realized when I'm traveling with my son, we have the same. We sort of ended up befriending the musicians traveling with us on a flight. The pilot was sitting next door to us, or even in restaurants, we've ended up having with an old gentleman who wanted, okay, why don't you then join us and have dinner with us?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's
Yeah, nice.
actually very nice. So your
Mm.
family stops become being just you and somebody else. Your family feeling of family extends much further, and familiarity too. It is a feeling of interconnectedness which sort of grows, and each time you come back from a trip, you've grown in some way. Not only the
Yeah.
child, I think the parents too, whoever traveled has grown.
Mm.
Hopefully, with that attitude, hopefully one has grown in some way. But
Yes.
you've
Yeah.
also seen diversity. I mean, the way you have lived life, two words which would describe it as well, the adventurous as well as the amount of diversity you've lived through, and you're still living it. Though you've gone back home, you've gone back to your roots. Let me put it that way. What would be your definition of diversity, your lived diversity?
Define diversity, crikey. Oh, that's such an interesting question. I don't really know how to answer that. I mean, diversity can be anything from, I've been so privileged to meet people of so many different nationalities and backgrounds. There's diversity there, diversity of countries, diversity of jobs. Yeah, diversity of people. I mean, I've met a lot of people that I don't like very much as well, that and people that I've had to do business with that maybe I don't particularly like their values and their opinions and the way they do business, etc. Through to, the other extreme, people I absolutely adore. Diversity of living conditions and working conditions and what's available and making do or that kind of thing. I mean,
I think you said it because yeah, it's a diversity, and what I find interesting is that in your own way, you brought a very deep intercultural understanding, competence to the whole equation because the words that you mentioned earlier, being open, empathy, and curious, and so on, they are actually tendencies one should have or acquire to be a part of an intercultural setting. Otherwise, you're not really intercultural. So, having said that, what I gather and I understand from your travels and your journey and your way of being, you inadvertently you are very, very intercultural in your way of being. The adaptations which come and a basic mindset, it's very much there. So, having said that, do you consider yourself a global citizen?
gosh, I could be a lot better. I strive to be a global citizen, but I'm a white woman living who grew up in a Western country with all the benefits that gave me, and I try to learn and be empathetic, etc. I try to be a global citizen. I try to show my daughter more than maybe her peers have seen of the world, to show her what's out there, what's going on. I'm not very intelligent. I'm not well studied, well read. I have lived in a lot of countries, but I don't know their history fully. I don't know their religions, their cultures fully at all. As I said before, I'm definitely still very much a visitor. I I want to have the best respect for each country and understanding, but I'll still say the wrong thing. I'm sure I've said lots of wrong things during this podcast, but I'm trying. I think that's the main thing. I'm trying to understand, do the right thing, help people in a constructive, non-colonial-esque way, empowering and sustainable way, regenerative way. So yeah, I'm striving to be a global citizen, even though I'm actually, as you say, kind of back in Yorkshire now, but my clients are all around the world. I have clients in Vietnam, India, Peru, Guatemala, Slovenia, Croatia, Portugal, Romania. So, every day I'm talking to people from different countries, understanding more about their countries, and they are all people who are doing business in a positive way, business for good, like B Corp and Travel Life and all these kind of places that are trying to make tourism, not make tourism, but really grow tourism for positive impact. So yeah, I'm trying. I don't think I'm there yet. Trying
That
to be a
is,
global citizen.
Becky, that is one of the most humble and beyond honest responses I've ever got. You are very humble to say all those things. But when you say you're trying to be a global citizen, what does that word mean to you? What does the term mean to you then?
I think it means seeing the global community as one. We're all in this together. Some people believe that on a spiritual level, that everything is connected. I mean, look at what's going on in the world. We have to understand and try and work together. We have to, what's the Buddhist meditation where you wish love for yourself, you wish love and, well-being on your loved ones, but you also wish it on your enemies and people you don't like, because we have to work together to make life better for everyone, to solve what's going on in the world and ultimately be happier ourselves. So yeah, to me, being a global citizen is just thinking about how everything we do impacts people around us and the ripple effect of that globally. Where do I choose to go on holiday, for instance, thinking about my industry, or just, for people to think about who do I book with, or where do I buy my food, or what do I do when I'm there? How do I interact with people that I come across in daily life? Yeah, I guess that's it. I see being a global citizen, thinking of myself as part of a global community, and that it matters what we all do on a daily basis.
Thank you for thinking like that. And I think you've said it very beautifully. One of the lines that you said, we're all in this together. So that sort of sums it up, because if that is the belief you live by, you define all your experiences by and your actions, what can be more beautiful than that? Thank you for thinking like that. And I hope more and more people think like that, because then the
Yeah,
world will be a more peaceful place.
yeah, and I think being humble and understanding our own imperfections. I don't think no one has to be perfect. We just have to be trying to move in the right direction.
So, generally, I would ask you for a line of inspiration that you would like to leave behind.
Yeah, just strive to make a positive impact on the world in whatever shape or form that is, however small or large. And just think about how you can impact the benefit of the world, the whole world.
Thank you for joining me today. It
Thank you,
has been
Meenu.
very interesting to get to know you a bit better. And I think for the wannabe travelers and the adventurers out there, or the people sitting on the edge who are travelers and trying to figure out what an adventure looks like, that would be interesting. So I hope they get that inspiration from this conversation.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I say an adventure is relative. If an adventure for some people is going on a hike in their own country, step by step, I always say, stepping stones. Just push yourself a little bit out of your boundary and then a bit further and then a bit further. You don't have to go cycling across Thailand as your first adventure.
Now, I totally agree. And thank you once again for joining me. And
Thanks for
thank you
having
for
me.
sharing your life. And I'm sure a lot of memories would have come back of
Yes,
all that you have been living through. It's been a rich life, I must say, Becky.
it has. I'm very, very lucky. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I'm very grateful.
Ah, hopefully we shall meet somewhere on this earth.
That would be nice. Yes, meet in person.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the series Between the East and the West. Do subscribe to the channels mentioned on the site in case, of course, you liked what you heard. I am Meenu Gupta, the host of the series, And I'll be looking forward to your comments. We love feedback. Thank you once again. Namaste and bye bye.